Part 1, approximately 1,700 words. The evening had a warm and gentle atmosphere, the kind that made people feel relaxed, even before stepping into the bright concert hall. Outside, the streetlights glowed softly on the sidewalk as guests made their way toward the entrance. Some walked slowly, taking in the beauty of the night, while others hurried so they wouldn't miss a single moment of the performance. It was the kind of night people looked forward to, a night planned weeks in advance, with tickets bought long before the seats had even started filling up. Inside the hall, the lights above the lobby shimmered like tiny stars. The crowd moved with a steady rhythm, guided by the humming excitement in the air. Families, couples, students, and music lovers from all walks of life came together for one reason: to see the famous pianist who had traveled from city to city, leaving behind shows that people remembered for years. Everyone talked about how talented he was, but even more, they talked about how he liked to interact with his audience, surprising them with little jokes and unexpected moments that made each performance feel personal. As the doors to the seating area opened, people entered with a sense of wonder. The hall was built with warm wooden walls that carried sound beautifully, and the stage sat like a quiet promise at the far end. At its center stood a grand piano, polished until it reflected the soft lights above. The piano almost seemed alive, as though it was waiting for someone to bring its voice to life. Guests began searching for their seats, some chatting, some looking around quietly, absorbing the atmosphere. There was a calm hush that always came with classical performances, a feeling that everyone was entering a shared space of respect and anticipation. Yet the air still buzzed with excitement, because this particular pianist wasn't known for dull evenings. People expected something special, something unforgettable. Near the front of the hall, a woman found her seat. She moved quietly, not drawing attention to herself. She wasn't dressed in a fancy gown like some others, nor did she carry the air of someone expecting to be noticed. She simply settled into her chair, folded her hands in her lap, and took a slow breath. She looked around, observing the hall, with gentle eyes, as though she appreciated the space more than most people around her. No one gave her much thought. She looked like any other guest, someone who came to hear a talented musician, enjoy a peaceful evening, and maybe feel inspired by the music. But something about her presence was calm, almost too calm. She didn't fidget, didn't check her phone, didn't whisper to the people beside her. She simply waited. As the audience filled in, the noise slowly faded. The bright overhead lights dimmed little by little until the room settled under a soft glow. People straightened up in their seats. A few last coughs and whispers drifted through the air before silence wrapped around the hall. Then, from backstage, the pianist appeared. He walked with an easy confidence, smiling warmly as he stepped into the light. The audience responded with applause that echoed across the hall. He waved, nodding in gratitude. He had performed in many places, and every time, his presence created a mix of admiration and excitement. When the applause died down, he sat at the piano and let his hands rest lightly on the keys. He didn't press a note just yet. Instead, he looked up, scanning the audience with his usual playful charm. "Good evening, everyone," he said. His voice carried smoothly through the hall, friendly and relaxed. "It's wonderful to see such a full house tonight. I hope you're ready for a little music, a little emotion, and maybe a small surprise or two." People laughed softly. They had heard stories of his surprises, nothing wild, just small moments that made a performance feel alive. He began to play, filling the room with gentle, expressive notes. The sound spread like warm waves, rising and falling with care. His fingers moved across the keys with ease, telling a story without needing any words. The audience leaned in, some closing their eyes, others watching every movement. Minutes passed as the music flowed. The pianist played with a kind of natural skill that came only from years of dedication. Each piece he performed brought a different emotion: joy, longing, peace, hope. People felt connected through the shared experience, as though everyone in the hall breathed in the music at the same time. After finishing one of his lighter pieces, the pianist paused, lifting his hands gently off the keys. He looked up again with a teasing smile. "You know," he said, "every night I look out at the audience and wonder how many hidden talents are sitting right here among you." A ripple of soft laughter moved through the room. He continued, "Sometimes I think maybe one of you could come up here and take my place. I'm sure you'd do a wonderful job." People laughed again, and the mood eased into something playful. "But tonight," he said, pointing loosely toward the front rows, "I'm feeling especially curious. Maybe someone here would like to show their skills?" The audience reacted with amusement. Some people looked at one another with wide smiles, whispering jokes. A few raised their hands jokingly, knowing full well the pianist was probably not serious. He scanned the seats slowly, his eyes passing over faces filled with surprise and amusement. Then, almost without thinking, he paused when he noticed the quiet woman sitting near the front. She had been watching him with calm interest, not laughing loudly or reacting dramatically, just observing. Something about her calm expression stood out to him. "You," he said with a light grin, lifting a finger toward her, "would you like to come try?" The hall erupted in laughter. It was all part of the fun, everyone thought. The woman seemed like the last person who would ever walk on stage. She didn't look nervous, but she didn't look eager either. She simply looked peaceful. People around her glanced her way, expecting her to refuse politely, wave her hand, or shake her head. But instead, she smiled. A small, gentle smile. The kind that didn't ask for attention. And then she nodded. The laughter in the room shifted into soft surprise. A few people sat up straighter. Others glanced around to see if they had heard correctly. The pianist blinked with a hint of surprise himself. He hadn't actually expected anyone to accept, much less someone who looked as humble and quiet as she did. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice playful, but also curious now. She nodded again. Something in the room changed. The playful energy softened into anticipation. No one knew what this moment would turn into, but suddenly the joke had become something real. "All right," the pianist said with a warm laugh. "Come on up then." The woman stood slowly. There was nothing dramatic about her movement, nothing rushed or timid. She simply rose from her seat and stepped into the aisle. People watched closely as she walked toward the stage, her footsteps light and steady. She climbed the small set of steps at the side of the stage, her posture calm. The pianist stepped aside politely, gesturing toward the bench as if presenting it to an honored guest. "Please," he said with a playful bow, "the piano is yours." Even he didn't seem to know what to expect. He still carried the hint of a smile, but now there was genuine curiosity behind it. The woman approached the piano and took a seat on the bench. She adjusted it slightly, not fumbling or hesitating, but with the natural ease of someone who knew exactly how to sit at a piano. A few people noticed and exchanged whispers. She placed her hands on her lap for a moment, taking a quiet breath. Then she lifted them and rested them gently on the keys. The hall grew absolutely silent, the kind of silence that felt like the whole room was holding its breath. The pianist folded his arms lightly, watching her with interest. The audience leaned forward, their eyes fixed on the stage. No one knew who this woman was. No one knew whether she could play at all. Maybe she had only accepted because she thought it would be fun. Maybe she wanted to amuse the crowd. Maybe she had no idea what she was doing. But there was something in the way she touched the keys, something so steady, so familiar, that it made people wonder. She pressed her first note, just a single, quiet note, and somehow that one sound carried a feeling, a kind of confidence. a kind of softness that made everyone freeze for a moment. Whatever was about to happen next, it was clear that this woman was not just an ordinary audience member who had randomly agreed to a joke. Something unusual was unfolding, something no one in the hall had expected. And as she prepared to place her fingers across the keys again, the entire room leaned into the moment, unaware that they were seconds away from witnessing something unforgettable. Part 2. Approximately 1,700 words. The hall remained silent. The kind of silence that didn't feel empty, but instead felt full of questions. People watched the woman with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. She didn't look nervous. She didn't look like someone who had been put on the spot as part of a small joke. Instead, she seemed calm, almost too calm for someone about to play in front of hundreds of people. The pianist stood slightly to the side, arms loosely crossed, wearing that gentle smile he often used when he teased the audience. But this time, the smile looked different. It wasn't just playful anymore. There was a hint of interest behind it, something sharper than amusement. Even he wasn't sure what to expect. The woman rested her fingers lightly on the keys, not pressing anything yet. For a moment, she simply stayed still. Some people thought she might be hesitating. Others wondered if she was trying to remember a simple tune. But the longer they watched, the more it looked like something else entirely. She wasn't unsure at all. She was preparing. There was a quiet confidence in the way her shoulders relaxed, in the steady rhythm of her breath. A few people in the audience whispered softly, trying not to disturb the strange moment. "Does she actually play?" Someone murmured. Another person whispered, "Maybe she knows one short song." But those whispers died quickly. When the first real note filled the air dot, it was soft, almost gentle, yet it carried through the hall with perfect clarity. The note was smooth, clean, intentional. People felt it before they understood it. It wasn't the sound of someone guessing at the keys. It wasn't the sound of someone trying something for the first time. It was the sound of someone who had touched a piano thousands of times, someone who understood it deeply. The woman played a second note, then a third, and then her hands began to move with slow, graceful certainty, shaping a melody that seemed to bloom in the quietest part of the room. The notes weren't rushed. They weren't shaky. They came together like pieces of a story that had been waiting to be told. At first, the audience simply listened in surprise. Many had expected a simple, hesitant tune. Instead, they heard something warm, emotional, and delicate. It made a few people hold their breath without even realizing they were doing it. The pianist, who had stepped aside to let her play, uncrossed his arms and tilted his head slightly, as if trying to understand who this woman really was. Her fingers moved with a kind of natural grace that didn't call attention to itself. She didn't show off. She didn't attempt anything flashy or loud. Instead, she built the melody slowly, letting each note settle into the room like small drops of water falling into a still pond. It was the kind of playing that didn't need speed or force to impress. The emotion spoke for itself. People in the audience leaned forward without realizing it, drawn in by something they couldn't explain. A man in the fourth row frowned softly, as though trying to remember where he had heard this style before. A young student sitting near the aisle clutched her program tightly, amazed by the way the woman's hands moved with such peaceful control. As the melody grew, her posture remained calm. She didn't lift her chin or close her eyes dramatically like some performers did. She simply played, letting the music speak while she became its quiet messenger. Something about her presence on the stage felt familiar yet mysterious, like someone who had lived many stories but wasn't trying to share them through words. She was sharing through sound instead. The pianist took a slow step closer, not to interrupt, but to observe more carefully. He had played on countless stages. He had heard musicians from all over the world. But something about the woman's playing made him pause. Her technique was too refined, too controlled, too natural for someone who claimed no attention when she entered the hall. She had the touch of someone who had trained for years, possibly even professionally. But if that was the case, why was she sitting in the audience like any ordinary guest? Why had no one recognized her? Why did she smile so quietly when he invited her up? The melody shifted into something slightly more complex. Her hands moved more quickly now, though never losing their smoothness. The sound filled the hall with a soft richness that wrapped itself around every corner of the room. A few people straightened in their seats, realizing they were witnessing something special. But even as she played with more skill, she never looked like she was trying to impress anyone. She wasn't trying to prove anything. Her expression stayed neutral, focused, almost peaceful. If anything, she looked like someone reconnecting with a part of herself she hadn't touched in a long time. The audience could feel it too, that strange sense of watching a quiet rediscovery rather than a performance. There was emotion moving through the notes, but it wasn't loud or dramatic. It was something private, something soft, something that made the listeners feel as though they were intruding on a memory they couldn't quite see. The pianist slowly lowered himself into a seat at the edge of the stage, hands resting on his knees. He looked almost mesmerized. This wasn't the moment he had planned. He had expected a light laugh, a few clumsy notes, maybe a short, sweet memory for the audience. But this had become something else entirely. He didn't try to stop her. He didn't make another joke. He simply listened, just like everyone else. The music continued to unfold, growing more layered. Her left hand shaped a soft undercurrent of harmony, while her right hand drew delicate patterns above it. A few people closed their eyes, letting the sound take them somewhere quiet inside themselves. It was the kind of music that didn't force emotion. It simply invited it gently. Minutes passed, though no one kept track of the time. Her playing had pulled the entire hall into a shared moment, something fragile and still. It felt as though the world outside the concert hall had simply disappeared. There were no streetlights, no passing cars, no ringing phones, just the sound of her hands moving gracefully over the keys. Somewhere near the back, a person who had been holding their program tightly finally let out a breath. Another person brushed a tear away from the corner of their eye, unsure why the soft melody touched them so deeply. Sometimes gentle music could reveal things inside people that loud, dramatic pieces never could. Even the stage lights seemed softer now, as though adjusting themselves to match the woman's quiet presence. The piano no longer looked like a showpiece meant for a star. It looked like a companion, something she had known for years. Something that understood her. Finally, after what felt like both a long time and no time at all, the melody began to settle. Her hands slowed. The notes faded gently, like the last few rays of sunlight disappearing behind the horizon. The ending was not dramatic or loud. It was soft, intentional, and full of calm acceptance. When the final note drifted into silence, no one moved. The hall remained still, wrapped in the quiet she had left behind. The audience seemed almost unsure what to do. Clapping felt too sudden, too sharp for the delicate moment they had just experienced. Even the pianist didn't move for a few long seconds. He simply looked at her, his expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. The woman slowly lifted her hands from the keys and placed them gently back on her lap. She took a soft breath, as though returning from a place she hadn't visited in years. Then she turned slightly toward the audience, her expression modest, almost shy, as if she hadn't realized what she had just done. Someone in the middle row whispered, "How can she play like that?" Another person murmured, "Who is she?" The questions spread quietly, but no one dared to speak too loudly. The moment felt too delicate to break. Finally, the pianist stood. He approached the woman with slow steps, as though he didn't want to disturb the air around her. When he reached the side of the piano, he looked at her with genuine respect. The playful teasing he had shown earlier was gone. What replaced it was something warm, humble, and deeply impressed. The audience watched the silent exchange between them with growing curiosity. They wanted answers. They wanted to understand how a simple, quiet woman from the crowd had just delivered one of the most moving performances they had ever heard. But for now, no one rushed the moment. They simply waited. The woman stood slowly from the bench, giving the piano a gentle pat as though thanking it. She didn't smile widely or look proud of herself. She just had a small, peaceful look that made her seem even more mysterious as she turned to face the hall fully. The audience finally broke out of their stunned silence. The applause rose like a wave soft at first, then quickly building into a strong, heartfelt sound that filled the entire space. People stood to their feet, clapping with genuine emotion, some still wiping tears from their eyes. A woman looked surprised by the reaction, as if she hadn't expected anyone to clap at all. She placed her hand over her heart briefly in a gesture of gratitude. She didn't bow deeply or dramatically. She simply nodded in thanks, her expression warm and humble. The pianist joined in the applause, his smile authentic and full of admiration. He looked at her as though he was seeing not just her, but the story behind her. Whatever history had given her that quiet grace, tonight had begun with a joke, a playful challenge meant for amusement. But now, as the crowd continued applauding with heartfelt appreciation, it was clear that something much larger had happened. The woman's unexpected performance had touched everyone in the hall, including the pianist himself. No. Part 3. Approximately 1,700 words. For a long moment, the applause continued like a warm tide filling the hall. The woman stood quietly beside the piano, her posture modest and calm. She wasn't soaking in the praise the way many performers might. She simply waited, letting the audience release the emotion the music had stirred inside them. There was something almost humble in the way she held herself, like she didn't fully believe she deserved such a strong response. When the applause finally began to settle, the pianist stepped closer to her. His expression had changed completely from the playful one he had shown earlier. Now his eyes carried a mixture of respect and curiosity. He wasn't looking at her as a random audience member anymore. He was looking at her as someone who clearly had a deep connection to the piano. He offered his hand in a gentle gesture of thanks, and she accepted it politely. The audience watched the exchange with interest, sensing that something important was about to happen. This was no longer a small moment inside a show. It had turned into something meaningful. The pianist turned to the crowd. "I think we can all agree," he said softly, "that what we just heard was beautiful." The audience responded with another round of applause, lighter this time, but full of feeling. The woman lowered her gaze, embarrassed but grateful. The pianist continued. "I invited her up here as a joke, but she came on stage with a kind of quiet confidence I didn't expect. And she played with a heart that touched every one of us. Moments like this remind me why I love music." His tone was sincere, almost reflective. The woman looked at him with a gentle smile, appreciating his words, but still appearing shy under the attention. Then he turned back to her. "If you don't mind," he said, "may I ask you a question?" The audience leaned forward again, eager to hear what would come next. The woman nodded slowly. "How long has it been since you last played?" he asked. A faint pause followed. She seemed to be choosing her words carefully, not out of fear, but out of long-held emotion. "A while," she answered softly. Her voice was gentle, carrying the quiet honesty of someone who didn't often talk about herself. "A while," the pianist repeated thoughtfully. "Well, it certainly didn't sound like a while." The audience chuckled softly. The woman dipped her head, touched by the compliment, but still modest. She didn't seem like someone used to the spotlight. Even standing on stage now felt like it wasn't her natural place, yet her presence was peaceful. Almost grounding Dot, the pianist stepped aside and gestured to the center of the stage, inviting her to speak if she wished. She didn't rush. She took a slow breath before looking out at the sea of faces, watching her with curiosity and warmth. "I used to play every day," she said quietly. "For many years." The audience listened intently. "But life changes," she continued. "Things happen that pull you in different directions. And sometimes you walk away from things you love without meaning to." Her words were simple, but they hit deeply. Many people in the hall related instantly. Everyone had something in their life they once loved, but had drifted away from music, art, dreams, goals. Hearing her speak about it so gently made the room feel unexpectedly emotional. The pianist nodded slowly, understanding more than she needed to explain. "And tonight," she added softly, "just hearing the music again felt familiar, like something I once knew very well." Her words carried a quiet sadness, but also a sense of rediscovery. She wasn't speaking for sympathy. She was simply sharing a small truth. The pianist looked at her warmly. "Well, I think I speak for everyone here when I say we're grateful you decided to say yes." Another gentle wave of applause filled the hall. The woman smiled shyly, placing a hand near her heart in appreciation. Then the pianist turned to the audience once more. "Shall we continue with the show?" he asked with his usual bright spirit. The crowd responded with enthusiastic agreement, though many were still captivated by the surprise performance. Before returning to his place at the piano, he leaned toward the woman and whispered something only she could hear. Whatever he said made her smile softly again. Then she stepped off the stage, walking back to her seat as people watched her with admiration and curiosity. Some whispered among themselves as she passed. "She plays like a professional," someone murmured. "Do you think she was trained somewhere special?" Another asked, but she didn't seem bothered by the attention. She simply returned to her seat and sat down quietly, folding her hands in her lap once more. Just as she had before everything had changed, the pianist took his place at the piano again and began playing his next piece. His music carried more emotion now, as though her unexpected performance had awakened something in him too. His hands moved with renewed energy, and the audience felt the shift. It was as if both musicians, one seasoned and one unexpectedly rediscovered, had inspired each other. Throughout the next several pieces, the audience listened with deeper appreciation. They still thought about the woman sitting quietly in the front, the melody she had played still lingering in their minds like a gentle echo. Midway through the pianist's next set, he paused again after finishing a particularly expressive piece. The audience applauded, and he smiled, clearly enjoying the evening. But then he glanced toward the woman again, his curiosity resurfacing. During the applause, he stepped away from the piano briefly and walked toward the edge of the stage. He didn't want to interrupt the flow of the show, but something was nudging him. "I hope you don't mind me saying this," he said to the audience, "but I can't stop thinking about the moment earlier." Soft laughter filled the hall. He continued, "There's something special about seeing someone reconnect with a part of themselves. It reminds us that talent doesn't disappear. It waits. And when the moment is right, it comes back." People nodded, touched by the thought. Many had felt something similar watching the woman play. The pianist turned his attention slightly toward her again. "And I have a feeling," he added warmly, "that this is not the last time we'll hear from her." The crowd reacted with soft cheers and supportive claps. The woman lowered her gaze, clearly moved, but still modest. She didn't seem eager for attention, but the audience was already enchanted by her story, whatever pieces of it they had seen so far. The performance continued. Piece after piece, each one delivered with a newfound spark in the pianist's playing. The stage lights glowed softly, filling the hall with a warm atmosphere as the evening slowly drifted forward. But the woman's moment hadn't left the room. It remained there, like a delicate thread woven through the rest of the night. Even those who tried to focus solely on the main performance found themselves remembering the soft melody she had created, the gentle way she had touched the keys, the peaceful expression on her face, not by the time the pianist finished the final piece of the evening. The hall was filled with a sense of satisfied silence that came only from a truly meaningful show. When he stood to bow, the audience applauded with enthusiasm, grateful for the concert, the music, and the surprising moment that had made the evening unforgettable. The pianist bowed deeply, then smiled and took a step forward, addressing the room one last time. "Thank you for being part of this night," he said sincerely. "You've been a wonderful audience, and I hope the music stays with you long after you leave this hall." The applause rose once more, warm and heartfelt. But then, before stepping away, he added with a small grin, "And I think we should give one more round of applause to our guest who reminded us that music lives inside us, even when we think we've left it behind." The crowd erupted with cheers, many turning to look at the woman again. She seemed surprised by the attention once more, but she smiled kindly and bowed her head slightly as people began gathering their coats and belongings. Conversations filled the room. Nearly everyone was talking about her. "Who do you think she is?" someone asked. "Maybe she used to be a performer," another person guessed. "Did you see how her hands moved?" That wasn't beginner playing. The woman didn't try to join any conversations. She simply waited a moment before standing, giving space for others to exit. She moved with the same quiet grace she had shown all evening. The pianist remained on stage for a while, greeting people and thanking them for coming. But his eyes drifted toward the woman repeatedly. Finally, when the crowd thinned a bit, he stepped down from the stage and walked toward her. "Excuse me," he said gently. She turned and smiled. "I just wanted to thank you again," he said. "Your playing? It was something special, truly." She nodded softly. "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." He hesitated, studying her expression. "If you don't mind me asking, why did you stop playing?" Her eyes softened, as though he had touched on something tender. She didn't seem bothered by the question, just thoughtful. "I guess life happened," she said quietly. "I didn't stop because I stopped loving it. She searched for the right words. Sometimes you move so fast through life that you forget pieces of yourself along the way." The pianist nodded gently, understanding more than she needed to explain. "And tonight?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Tonight reminded me of something I thought I had lost." He returned the smile. "You haven't lost it. Not even a little." She looked down for a moment, touched. "If you ever feel like playing again," he added softly, "I'd be honored to hear you, even outside the stage." The woman looked up, surprised by the sincerity in his tone. She didn't answer. Part 4. Approximately 1,700 words. The night after the concert felt strangely quiet. The woman walked home with a slow, thoughtful pace, her steps softer than usual. Something inside her was still echoing with the sound of the piano. The melody she had played lingered in her mind, like a warm thread she didn't want to let go of. She hadn't expected any of it, the invitation, the attention, the applause. She had gone to the concert simply to enjoy an evening of music, but instead, she had stepped into a moment that stirred pieces of her past she had tucked away. When she reached her small apartment, she placed her coat on the chair by the door and sat down for a moment, trying to settle the feelings inside her. She looked around the room, noticing how still it was. Everything felt familiar: her books, the little lamp by the window, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, but she felt different. Almost like she had woken up from a long, deep sleep She closed her eyes and took a slow breath. In the back of her mind, she could still feel the piano keys beneath her fingers, the softness of their touch, the way the music had flowed out of her without effort. She hadn't realized how much she missed that feeling until tonight. After a while, she stood and walked toward the small shelf in the corner of her living room. On the bottom shelf, behind a stack of old notebooks, she pulled out a thin cloth case. It was dusty, a little worn, as if it hadn't been touched in a very long time. She brushed off the surface gently and unzipped it. Inside was a stack of sheet music, filled with handwritten notes and small markings she had made years ago. She looked through each page slowly. Some pieces she recognized immediately. Others felt almost foreign, like something from another life. She smiled softly, running her fingers over the faded ink. Then she set the music down and walked to her old keyboard, one she hadn't used in years. It sat against the wall, its cover closed, gathering dust. She hesitated for a moment, then lifted the cover. The keys looked untouched, quiet, waiting. She sat in front of the keyboard and placed her hands on the keys. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from emotion. She pressed one key, then another. The sound wasn't as warm or rich as the grand piano from the concert hall, but even so, it awakened something inside her, a feeling she hadn't felt in a long time. She played a few notes, then a short melody. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. The important thing was that it was hers. Hours passed without her realizing. She moved from one melody to another, her fingers exploring old habits, forgotten skills, and memories she didn't even know were still there. It felt strange but comforting, like revisiting a childhood home. By the time she looked at the clock, it was far past midnight. She let out a soft breath and closed the keyboard gently. She knew she should rest, but for the first time in years. She felt a spark, small but steady. Something had changed. Meanwhile, across the city, the pianist sat in his hotel room with the quiet hum of traffic outside his window. He had been thinking about the woman ever since the concert ended. He tried to go through his usual routine, reviewing the show, planning for the next city, making notes about pieces he wanted to practice. But he kept returning to her unexpected performance. It wasn't just that she had played well. He met many talented people throughout his travels, but there had been something different about her, something unspoken in the way she touched the keys, something calm but deeply emotional. He found himself wondering who she was, what her story had been, and why someone with such skill had been sitting anonymously in the audience. He replayed the moment in his mind, the quiet confidence, the gentle smile, the way she didn't try to impress anyone yet moved everyone. At one point, he even took out his notebook and scribbled a few lines of thought. Her playing wasn't loud. It wasn't showy. It simply felt honest. He tapped his pen against the page. It had been a long time since he felt truly surprised during a performance, not by himself, not by another artist. But tonight had been different. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling for a moment. He wondered if he should reach out to her somehow. But he didn't know her name, didn't know anything about her life. All he had was the brief conversation they shared and the lingering impression her music left. He sighed softly, unsure of what to do, but certain of one thing. He hoped it wasn't the last time he encountered her. The next day arrived quietly. The morning sunlight filtered gently through the woman's curtains as she woke up, still feeling the emotional weight of the previous night. She sat up slowly, rubbed her eyes, and smiled without thinking. Her hands felt warm, almost energized. She hadn't felt that way in so long. She went to the kitchen, made herself a warm drink, and stood near the window while sipping it, watching people walk by on the street below. The world looked the same, but her heart felt different, lighter, more open. After breakfast, she returned to the keyboard. It called to her in a way it hadn't in years. She lifted the cover again and touched the keys. The sound echoed softly through her apartment. She played for a long time, letting her fingers wander, making small mistakes but not caring. Each note reminded her of a part of herself she had forgotten. In the afternoon, she stepped outside for a walk, letting the fresh air clear her mind. The city buzzed with its usual rhythm, cars passing, people talking, distant sounds of music coming from small shops. But in her mind, she could still hear the melody she had played at the concert hall. As she walked, she passed by a small music school. The windows were filled with posters advertising lessons and children's recitals. She stopped for a moment and looked through the glass. Inside, a young student sat at a piano, learning a simple tune while the instructor guided softly. Something about that scene made her smile. She didn't envy the student or feel any sense of loss. Instead, she felt a warm sense of connection, a reminder that music continued everywhere, even in the smallest corners. She continued walking until she reached a park. She sat on a bench and watched people pass by. Nearby, a street performer played a guitar lightly, singing a gentle tune. The melody drifted through the air, simple but heartfelt. The world was full of music, she realized. She had just forgotten how much she loved being part of it. As she sat there, her thoughts drifted back to the pianist. His kindness, his sincerity, his curiosity about her story. She wondered if he had forgotten her already, if she had simply been a surprising moment in one night of his long journey. She didn't expect anything more from him. He had his world, his schedule, his career. Still, she felt grateful. He had given her a chance, even if unintentionally, to reconnect with something she had let slip away. Back at the hotel, the pianist spent the morning practicing. But something felt different in his playing too. He paused often, thinking about the woman's touch on the keys, her calmness, her expression. He took a break and sat by the window, looking down at the busy street below. His next concert was scheduled for the following evening in a nearby city. He needed to prepare, but part of his mind kept drifting to the thought of inviting her again, not on stage for a joke, but truly inviting her to play. But he didn't want to pressure her. He didn't want to disrupt her life. He only hoped she would continue playing. Whether he saw her again or not, he considered writing a short note for her and asking the concert hall staff if they could pass it along. But he didn't even know her name. Without a name, there was no clear way to reach her. He gave up on the thought for the moment, deciding to let life unfold naturally. As the day passed, the woman returned home from her walk and sat down at her keyboard again. She didn't think about being perfect or performing for anyone. She simply played for herself. And as she did, she felt a sense of peace slowly settling into her chest. Her phone buzzed lightly on the table beside her. She glanced at it, expecting a simple message from a friend or a reminder she had said earlier. But instead, it was a short message from the concert hall. Her heart skipped. "Thank you for being part of last night's performance. The pianist asked us to let you know he was deeply moved by your playing. If you ever wish to attend another show as his guest, please reach out." She read the message twice, unsure if she was imagining it. But it was real. A soft smile formed her face, not because of the offer, but because someone had taken the time to reach out, someone who understood the weight of what that moment had meant. She set the phone down and took a deep breath, letting the warmth settle inside her. She didn't know what she would do next. She didn't know if she would return to performing or simply continue playing at home. But for the first time in a long time, she felt open to possibilities. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the buildings and painted the sky with soft colors, she sat down at her keyboard once more. Her fingers moved with a little more confidence, a little more hope. Across the city, the pianist practiced too, unaware that his message had reached her. But something inside him felt lighter, as if sending that small gesture had allowed him to let go of the lingering curiosity. He played with a renewed sense of purpose, the memory of her performance guiding his hands on the keys. And somewhere in the quiet of her apartment, the woman played with a sense of rediscovery, soft, honest, and full of emotion. Their music, though miles apart, carried the same spirit, a spirit of something beginning again. Part 5, approximately 1,700 words. The following morning arrived with a soft, warm glow spreading across the woman's apartment. She woke up slowly, feeling unusually rested. For a moment she lay still, letting the quiet fill the room. Then the memory of the message from the concert hall drifted back to her, and she felt a gentle pull in her chest. She reached for her phone to read it again. Even though she had already gone over the words several times the night before, she wanted to feel the truth of them once more. She read the simple lines slowly, letting each one settle in her mind. It wasn't a long message, and it wasn't dramatic, but it carried sincerity, something she hadn't received in a long time. She slipped the phone back onto the table and sat up. The sunlight brushed against the floor through a gap in the curtain, and she watched it for a moment before getting up. She walked to the kitchen, made herself a warm drink, and let the soft steam rise near her face. She took a sip and stood by the window. The street below was lively already. People starting their day, cars moving steadily, and a few birds landing on the branches of the tree outside. She felt strangely connected to everything around her, as if the world had shifted in a small but important way. After breakfast, she moved toward the keyboard again. Her hands hovered above the keys, her fingers brushing lightly across them before pressing down. She started with a simple melody, letting it shape itself naturally. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't trying to be perfect. She was just playing something she had missed without even knowing. As she played, she thought about the pianist. She could still recall the expression on his face while she performed on stage. It wasn't the look of someone watching a casual moment. He had genuinely listened. He had noticed the emotion hidden within her quiet performance. She wondered where he was now. Probably traveling to another city, preparing for another show. People like him moved constantly, new halls, new audiences, new experiences every week. She imagined him sitting at a grand piano that morning, warming up his hands, going over details of the evening's concert. But she also wondered if he was thinking of her again, even for just a moment. Meanwhile, the pianist was indeed practicing. He had arrived in the next city late the previous night and checked into a hotel that was comfortably quiet. This morning, he felt a lightness in his chest he couldn't fully explain. He hadn't known if the concert hall would actually pass along his message, and he didn't expect a reply. But even without hearing from her, he felt that reaching out had been the right thing. As he played, he found himself drifting into melodies he hadn't touched in years, soft pieces, thoughtful pieces, ones he usually saved for himself rather than the stage. His mind wandered gently to the moment when she had sat at the piano, her hands steady, her touch natural. He paused mid-note, let the sound fade, and smiled to himself. The day continued quietly for both of them, each carrying a sense of something unspoken, but growing. By afternoon, the woman decided to step out. The air outside was cooler than the day before, with a soft breeze brushing against her face. She walked slowly, letting her thoughts settle. She passed the small music school again and paused by the window. Today, a different student was inside, a young boy trying to play a simple scale. His concentration was strong, and the instructor guided him patiently. Seeing that, she felt another small spark of warmth. Music didn't always have to be grand or impressive. Sometimes it lived in small steps, small moments. She continued her walk, stopping by a nearby cafe. She ordered a warm drink and found a table near the window. As she sat, she watched people pass by outside. Some hurried, some strolled, some talked with excitement or laughed with friends. She enjoyed observing these patterns of life. It reminded her that everyone carried their own stories. She opened her phone and glanced at the message again. For the first time, she considered replying. Not to accept or decline anything, but simply to express gratitude. She typed slowly. "Thank you for the message. It meant a lot to me. Please tell him I appreciate the kindness." She stared at the words for a long time. Then she erased them. She didn't want to sound too formal. She tried again. "Thank you for reaching out. Please let him know I'm grateful." Again, she hesitated. Finally, she erased everything and put the phone face down. She wasn't ready yet. Not because she was afraid, but because she didn't want to reply out of uncertainty. She wanted to respond with clarity, and she needed more time for that. After finishing her drink, she stepped outside again and walked through the rest of the afternoon light. She returned home later, feeling calm. As she placed her coat on the chair and sat down, she noticed something unusual. Her small mailbox inside the building had a flyer tucked halfway out. She picked it up, expecting it to be a simple advertisement. But it wasn't. It was a brochure from the concert hall, the same hall where she had performed just a night earlier. She flipped it open. Inside were upcoming events, schedules, and a small note attached with a paperclip. She unfolded it. "Just in case you ever want to visit again. You are welcome any time." There was no signature, just the gentle message. She didn't know if the pianist wrote it himself or if the staff member added it. But either way, it warmed her heart. The rest of the evening passed quietly. She played a few soft melodies before making dinner. She listened to the sounds of the city through her open window, cars passing, distant voices, a dog barking, the soft hum of life around her. She didn't feel lonely. For the first time in a long time, she felt connected. Across the city, preparations for the pianist's concert were underway. He met with the stage team, checked the sound equipment, and rehearsed a few pieces to warm up. But even in the middle of the busy preparations, there were moments when his mind drifted. He remembered the quiet strength in her hands, the thoughtful expression on her face, the natural flow of her playing. As he sat in his dressing room before the show, he looked into the mirror and tried to center himself. He reminded himself that every audience was new, every night was fresh, and every performance mattered. But he also allowed himself the quiet hope that she might reach out someday. He wasn't expecting anything grand. He simply hoped her rediscovery of music would continue. When he walked onto the stage that evening, the audience greeted him with warm applause. He bowed, sat at the piano, and took a deep breath. Then he began to play. The notes flowed gently at first, almost like a conversation. He didn't play the same program as the night before. Instead, he adjusted the order, changed one of the pieces, and added a soft melody that wasn't originally planned. The audience listened with stillness. Near the end of the performance, he paused for a moment before the final piece. His hands rested lightly above the keys as he thought of the woman who had sat in the audience days earlier. He wasn't playing this last piece for the crowd. He was playing it for her, even if she would never know. The music drifted through the hall, calm, warm, gentle. It carried honesty. When the last note faded, the audience applauded with enthusiasm. But the pianist's thoughts were somewhere else. Carried on the sound of the soft final melody. Back in her apartment, at that exact moment, the woman sat at her keyboard, playing a tune she had learned long ago. She paused suddenly, feeling a strange sensation in her chest, as if someone somewhere was playing something with the same energy. She wasn't someone who believed deeply in strange connections, but the feeling was undeniable. She closed her eyes for a moment and let the thought come naturally. Maybe he's on stage right now. And somehow, that thought comforted her God after the concert. The pianist stayed backstage for a short while, signing programs for audience members, taking photos, greeting guests. But even as he smiled and thanked people, his mind drifted to the idea of leaving another message for the woman. He didn't want to overwhelm her, but he didn't want her to feel forgotten either. When he returned to his quiet hotel room, he sat with his notebook again. He wrote a short line. "I hope she continues playing." He didn't plan to send those words anywhere. He just wanted to place them somewhere safe. As midnight approached, he looked out the window at the quiet city streets. His life was full of movement travel, sound checks, rehearsals, but something about the woman's presence, brief as it had been, made him feel grounded in a way he hadn't felt in years. Meanwhile, the woman prepared for bed. She sat on the edge of her mattress for a moment, reflecting on the day. She felt lighter, calmer, more open to whatever might come next. Before turning out the light, she looked at the flyer from the concert hall. Again, the little note attached to it. She smiled and set it beside her keyboard, where she could see it in the morning. And as she lay down, she whispered to herself, "Maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow for the music, for the possibilities, for whatever story was slowly unfolding between two people connected by a single melody that neither of them had expected." Part 6, approximately 1,700 words. The next morning arrived with a gentle calm that settled softly across the woman's apartment. She opened her eyes slowly, almost reluctantly, as if she wanted to hold on to whatever quiet dream she had been drifting through. She stretched her hands slightly, feeling a small ache that reminded her of the hours she had spent at the keyboard the night before. For a few moments, she lay still, listening to the faint sounds of the world outside, the muffled hum of cars, the distant chirping of birds, the soft rustling of the tree branches near her window. Life continued with its steady rhythm, but she felt something different inside herself. Something clearer. She sat up and looked across the room. Sunlight peeked around the curtain, falling softly across the keyboard. It felt like an invitation, gentle but present. She slipped out of bed, walked toward it, and sat down. Her fingers hovered over the keys as she allowed her mind to settle. She pressed a few soft notes, feeling the familiar vibration spread through her fingertips. It was simple, delicate, and exactly what she needed to start the day. She played quietly for a few minutes before stopping. Her eyes drifted to the flyer from the concert hall sitting beside the keyboard, the one with the small note attached. She picked it up again. "You are welcome any time." She traced the words lightly with her fingertip. The message wasn't extravagant or dramatic, but its sincerity reached her deeply. Someone had taken the time to send it. Someone had remembered. The thought filled her with warmth. She made herself a warm drink and went to the window. As she sipped, she thought about the pianist, where he might be now, what city he had traveled to, whether he had another concert scheduled that evening. She wondered if he felt the same sense of quiet reflection she did. Maybe, maybe not. But the idea was comforting. After breakfast, she spent time tidying her apartment. She dusted shelves, folded clothes, and opened the windows wide to let in fresh air. She felt lighter moving around the room, as if a part of her had softened, allowing her to breathe more fully. In the afternoon, she stepped outside for a walk. The air was crisp, the sky a clear blue. She followed the familiar streets, but today they felt different, as if she was seeing them through a slightly brighter lens. She passed the small music school again. Today, the sound of a violin drifted from inside, a student trying to learn a simple scale. It wasn't perfect, but it was full of effort. She smiled. She continued on, walking without a particular destination in mind. Eventually, she found herself near a large bookstore. She stepped inside, drawn by the calm atmosphere and the soft rustle of pages being turned. She wandered through aisles filled with novels, biographies, and music books. In the music section, she paused. There were collections of classical compositions, modern pieces, and practice books for beginners. She ran her finger along the spines, feeling a gentle curiosity stirring. Then she saw a slim book of simple piano pieces meant for reflection and relaxation. Pieces written to ease the mind, not to impress anyone. She picked it up, flipped through the pages, and felt a spark of encouragement. She bought the book. On her way home, she felt a quiet excitement, almost like a child discovering something new. She held the book close as she walked. Meanwhile, in a city a few hours away, the pianist was finishing breakfast in the hotel dining area. He had a rehearsal scheduled in the early afternoon and a concert later that evening. His schedule was tight, but his mind kept drifting. He thought about the woman again, the calm strength she carried, the natural way she played. He still didn't know anything about her life, her past, or even her name. But the impression she left was undeniable. Sometimes a single moment could open something deeper than years of practice. He had experienced thousands of performances, but very few moments struck him as genuinely as hers did. After finishing his meal, he returned to his room and sat with his notebook. He flipped through pages filled with sketches of melodies, thoughts about performances, lingering questions, and small memories collected during his travels. He paused and wrote a simple sentence. Some people enter your path quietly, but their impact stays. He didn't write her name because he didn't know it, but the thought was clearly about her. As the afternoon passed, he went to the concert hall for rehearsal. The hall was smaller than the previous one, but warm and welcoming. The staff greeted him kindly. He practiced scales, ran through a few pieces, and checked the acoustics. But even during rehearsal, he found himself returning to a soft melody he hadn't planned to play. Something gentle, something reflective. That evening, as he stepped onto the stage, he felt a sense of calm mixed with longing. He didn't expect the woman to be in the audience, of course, but part of him played for her anyway. Back in her apartment, the woman sat at her keyboard again, opening the book she had bought. She chose a simple piece and began to play. The notes were soft and slow, flowing gently through the room. As she played, she thought about the moment on stage when she had surprised herself by accepting his invitation. She remembered the warmth of the audience, the quiet attention, the way the pianist had watched with genuine interest. That single moment had changed something inside her, not dramatically, but deeply. She continued to play, letting the piece unfold with ease. When she finished, she closed the book softly and looked toward the window. The sky outside was turning shades of orange and pink as the sun set. She felt peaceful. The next day arrived with gentle rain tapping against the window. She loved rainy mornings. They calmed her, softened her thoughts, and quieted the noise inside her mind. She made tea and sat by the window, watching raindrops slide down the glass. She felt deeply grateful for the music she had rediscovered, grateful for the unexpected moment that brought her back to it, and grateful for the pianist who had unknowingly helped her reconnect with something she had lost. She finally reached for her phone. She opened the message from the concert hall again. Then, with a steady breath, she wrote a reply. Please thank him for the kind message. I'm grateful for the opportunity I was given. It helped me rediscover something important. She read the words once, twice, then pressed send. The message left her phone silently, a small gesture, but meaningful. Across the country, the pianist was packing his bag, preparing to leave for the next city. He received a notification on his phone. He glanced at it out of habit, not expecting anything unusual. But when he saw the message, he stopped. He read it slowly, feeling a soft warmth grow in his chest. He didn't need a long explanation. He didn't need details. Those few sentences were enough. He sat down on the edge of the bed in his hotel room. Holding the phone gently, he smiled. That was all he had hoped for, that she hadn't forgotten the moment. That the experience had given her something meaningful. And that maybe, somewhere in her quiet world, she had begun to play again. He typed a response and sent it through the concert hall's representative, keeping it simple. Tell her I'm glad. And tell her I hope she continues playing wherever life takes her. He didn't expect a reply. He didn't need one. The exchange felt complete in its own quiet way. When the message reached her later that day, the woman felt a small breath catch in her chest. She smiled softly, touched by the kindness. She didn't reply. Not because she didn't want to, but because the message felt like a gentle closing of a chapter 1 that didn't need more words in the days that followed. Both of them continued their lives with a quiet sense of uplift. The woman practiced the piano a little each day, exploring new pieces, returning to old ones, and discovering moments of peace she had forgotten existed. Her apartment slowly filled with the warm sound of music, sometimes soft, sometimes slightly uncertain, but always honest. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't need to. She only knew that music was part of her again. The pianist continued his tour, traveling from city to city, performing in halls of different sizes and atmospheres. But something had shifted in him as well. His performances felt fuller, not louder or more dramatic, but more present. More grounded in quiet moments. He would think of the woman, not out of longing or regret, but out of gratitude. She had reminded him of the authenticity he sometimes lost in the busy rhythm of traveling and performing. Months passed. The woman's playing grew stronger. She eventually joined a small community group that met once a week to share music. Nothing formal, just people who loved playing, no pressure, no spotlight. She enjoyed it. It gave her a sense of belonging. One evening, during one of these small gatherings, she played a gentle melody that left the room in a thoughtful hush. When she finished, people smiled warmly, some applauding softly, others telling her how beautiful it was. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, not pride, but gratitude. Gratitude for the moment, long ago, when a famous pianist had unexpectedly invited her onto a stage as a joke. Gratitude for the way life had unfolded afterward. The pianist, months into his tour, performed a quiet, reflective piece during one of his shows. It was a piece he had written himself, something soft, honest, inspired by a memory. The audience felt its sincerity. He didn't announce the meaning behind it. He didn't need to in different cities, far apart. Two people continued living their lives, connected not by constant messages or dramatic gestures, but by a single shared moment that had changed the way they both saw music and themselves. There,